Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and there are some class tuning adjustments coming in tomorrow, so I wanted to make a tier list predicting where I think specializations are going to move. Most of those changes were directed at healing specializations and Demon Hunter, but changes to healing specializations have impacts on existing DPS specs because some DPS specs are countered by certain healers or counter other healers. So depending on where those healers move, other DPS are going to be making some significant gains or losses. So if you want to keep track of where to expect your specialization to land on Tuesday, then this is going to be a great video to watch in terms of their performance. This tier list is constructed from the perspective of a solo PvP experience, not a rated 3v3 experience. Those are two entirely different buckets of worms, basically, because of how dampening changes between solo shuffle, battleground blitz, and 3v3 arena. It does change the viability of a lot of specializations, so do note that here. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Let's get started here. Affliction Warlock. This is a specialization that I think is rocking and rolling, but you really got to get it dialed in on how to play this specialization, because if you don't got it dialed in, it's not going to be able to deliver you the type of performance that you can actually expect from it. So it's much harder to pull off, but I do think that it is still going to be strongly situated in an A+ tier position. However, maybe it tweaks down a little bit because of the buffs to Restoration Shaman. Restoration Shaman in particular is a very challenging healer to match up with. So, and also there are some other DPS specs that are tough for it. Maybe it could wiggle here. I could see it maybe wiggling down a little bit. Arcane Mage, this is another one. It's going to struggle, I think. I think Hunters in particular are going to get a lot better. Beast Mastery for sure, because the Mistweaver Spinning Crane Kick build is getting nerfed, which means all pet-based classes are getting stronger. Those pet-based classes are difficult for you as Arcane. Also, Arcane does well into Mistweaver, and if Mistweaver disappears as a result of these changes in the meta, then you're losing out on a healer that you counter. So for me, I'm actually dropping Arcane down here into the B tier. I think it's still got great burst damage. Maybe, honestly, actually, I should maybe take a bit of that back. It can do okay into the pet classes just because of the cleaving damage from your Arcane Barrage. But I think that Mistweavers are likely going to fall off a bit there. If Resto Shamans come up, DPS Shaman specs are already really good. Ferals are already really good. This is probably not the best type of situation for you at the given moment. Armed Warrior, still going to be a great specialization. I think it's going to be fantastic. You're going to have a lot of Death Knights probably starting to peak up as a result of the nerfs to Mistweaver, particularly Unholy. Maybe not too many changes necessarily to Frost, and then obviously some of the nerfs that they've made to Devourer, Demon Hunter. But unfortunately, they don't really apply too much to you. They nerf the damage reduction on their Vengeful Retreat, and they nerf the damage reduction that they get when they land an Interrupt. Most Demon Hunters I know don't really even land interrupts, so I don't know if that's going to even have much impact. And then the Vengeful Retreat really only affects like casters. But so I already had you in the A+ position before this point. You're still just going to be a very solid spec. Assassination, I'm actually going to put into the A tier. I think that the spec's just really solid burst damage one-shots. I think next patch is getting improved significantly from some of the pain points that it's got from this season. And I've honestly been having a lot of fun with it when I've been going with it. And with the changes that are coming through to the healers, I think it's still going to be doing really well. I don't think it's going to be moving really anywhere that you wouldn't anticipate. Augmentation Evoker, I'm still not a huge fan of it as far as like its overall strength. I think Eben might need some type of tool or mechanism to sustain itself when you get crowd controlled, much like Void Metamorphosis does for Demon Hunters, because when it falls off to just one random kick or CC, it just feels awful. So for me, I think Aug is like, I think it's worse than Arcane, to be honest, especially when you look at the ladder representation. There's like no Augs even close to the highest rated Arcane mages, so I think it'd be unfair to say that Aug is that strong since it's so hard to get overall rating with it. Blood Death Knight, again, we don't really see a lot of these in Arena. I actually got gifted subs to play Vengeance last night, and it wasn't actually that bad. I think most of the tanks, when it comes to Battleground Blitz at least, Guardian Druid's probably a cut edge above every other tank, and then in Arenas, Paladin's like a cut edge above every other tank, but it's pretty close other than that. So Guardian Druid will slap into like the A+ tier, along with Blood DK here. I think mobility is a bit of an issue here, and I don't think it does really too much damage relative to some of the other tanks. Beast Mastery Hunter for sure is going to be S tier specialization, especially with the pet nerfs to Spinning Crane Kick. It was already kind of cranking. I think that it's going to be a very powerful specialization come Tuesday. Brewmaster, I think, does a tiny bit more damage than Blood DK, which is the main reason I'm putting it up here, but they could be competitive based on utility alone, at least for Battlegrounds, with Chains of Ice and Death Grip being the main components here. But you do have some nice tricks up your sleeve as well, with like knockbacks with your Ox Kick and things like that that can benefit you on maps like Eye of the Storm. Feral Druid, fantastic pick still. Going to be putting it up into the A+ tier. Again, much like Affliction, bit harder to get results from, but once you get to that skill level, it can definitely deliver A+ tier level results. Balanced Druid, it's honestly not too bad. If you play the Keeper of the Grove build, I've been able to get up into the rank 1 range with it, with avoiding it pretty much the whole season because I just got tired of the playstyle, and randomly now I'm actually liking it again. So crazy if you just take a break from something, come back, and you actually enjoy it more when you come back to it. But defense is a little bit shaky. It's getting a lot of improvements, much like Assassination Rogue next season. So both these could be really big shining stars. I'll probably make tier lists talking about the next patch once we actually know when its release date is happening. Devourer or Demon Hunter, I really don't see this one moving. I think it's still going to be S tier. The Vengeful Retreat nerf is like maybe a Chaos Bolt, is going to hit you 10% harder when you Vengeful Retreat. But I feel like you still have so much sustain through dots. The only classes I really see kind of punishing you are Marksmanship Hunters and Subtlety Rogues. Outside of those, it seems like you're borderline invincible in a lot of cases, kind of untouchable to a lot of melee. I don't think it's going to shift too much. I'm going to leave it up on S tier. Demonology might feel a tiny bit better because of the Spinning Crane Kick nerfs, but again, if you weren't running into Mistweavers, you're probably not going to feel that. And then Restless Shaman, again, as a Warlock, can be annoying to play into. It didn't really get any changes either to it. I'm still going to leave it down on the C tier. It's just its overall damage is just a tiny bit too low. I think if the Demon Bolts and Hand of Gul'dans and Shadow Bolts got another little bit of a bump like they did before, I think they're buffing the right abilities. It's just bumping up by just a tiny bit more would put it in a much more solid position. But it does have good crowd control. Is it really as bad as AUG? It's honestly probably not as bad. Again, I don't see AUG's even close to as high rating as these other specializations, so I think it's unfair to really put any spec next to AUG. It probably just should be down here. But damage is going to be your main issue. You can kind of control matches, though, with good utility and crowd control. Destruction Warlock, I think, is a bit better than Demonology. I'm going to put it up here with Boomkin. I think that if you play like Succubus builds, you can get some decent pressure out with this. However, maybe I should shift it down purely because I think Beast Mastery and Unholy DK are going to see like a pretty significant uptick, and I think those can be very challenging specializations. I'll leave it on A for now, and we'll consider it later. Devastation Evoker, I got some mastery gear on this, started playing it, and realized that this spec does not deserve to be as low on the representation as it is. It's very strong. Azure Sweep burst windows can do actually very chunky damage. I really don't see the specialization being lower than A+. Maybe not S, can struggle with Subtlety Rogues, and maybe Marksmanship Hunters a little bit, and obviously those are pretty popular at the moment, but it's very good if you actually get the right stats like I did on my most recent playthrough with it. I think it's actually very solid. So going up into the A+, does remarkably high overall damage. Dispriest, surprisingly, is getting buffed. I think for solo play, that Dispriest is actually a phenomenal healer. So I'm pumping this back up into S. It's just I think it's a really fun healer too, especially when you can play between Voidweaver and Oracle, and it feels so good when you can get away with playing Voidweaver, and Voidweaver's still cranking out damage higher than most DPS specs a lot of times if you're actually able to successfully free cast with it. So Discipline Priest for me is a really good pick for solo PvP. Elemental Shaman, I think it's probably a little bit better than Boomkin, a little bit better than Destro, but it's honestly pretty close. Do I want to say Ellie is? I think it's A+ at least. I think it's somewhere in here with Affliction and with Devastation Evoker. I've really been enjoying flexing between Stormbringer, and pretty much nobody else plays it, but I found a way to play it, and it's working out with me with Static Field Totem and getting distance and just casting Tempest off melee with that, and just absolutely zapping people, especially in Battlegrounds. I've been really enjoying actually the multi-build on it. I really like that there's a choice between the two nodes and some interesting moments where you can benefit from them. I think A+ is fair to put it at the moment. Enhancement Shaman, very similarly, I think is A+. Definitely, at least. Depends on the circumstance. Like Enhance can struggle into melee DPS, which we might see a little bit more of, especially if DKs have an uptick, but it does really well into casters, and I don't think Devourer and Frost Mage are going to be moving too much as a result of the changes. So it can do really well there as far as overall sustain, and the damage reduction that it can provide to magic damage is definitely uncontested related to other ones. It's probably the tankiest one into casters. Frost DK, I think the only thing holding this back really is squishiness, very similar to Assassination Rogue, honestly. Its one-shot's one of the strongest in the game, can absolutely crank and run people over, so I think offense is carrying these specs in the A tier, but defense is definitely shaky. Fire Mage, I don't think is particularly fantastic. Maybe it's a step above Arcane just because it's mostly instant cast damage and you have multiple schools of magic, but its defense is much more apparently weak than Frost, so I'm thinking like somewhere up here in the A tier is probably a good place for it to be situated. It's also a bit easier to pull off than Arcane, although you do have to aim and land Meteor pretty successfully, otherwise you're not going to be doing a lot, which does have like a little bit of a skill check behind it. Frost Mage, unsurprisingly, still in the S tier. I just don't see this moving until next season when they address the overpowered barrier talent, but depending on how much they scale stamina up, it might even still just be tanky, unkillable in the hands of the best players. And I really think that he should focus on making its passive defense stronger so that new players have a better time with it, because new players are the ones that are carrying that high death rate, is because they don't know how to use alter time or barriers, and they can't react to the damage. But in the hands of the best players, a good reaction time, they're unkillable. So I feel like shifting some of the active mitigation to passive mitigation would be a good way to kind of organize the Frostmage specialization to lower its overall death rate for new players, but also to make it not just completely a behemoth. Although, of course, next season also they're nerfing the snare, so we will come back to this tier list for next season. But for this season at the moment, I think Frost is still absolutely dominating. Fury Warrior, this might come as a surprise, but I think Fury Warrior is at least up here in the A+. Remember that this tier list goes from top to bottom, left to right, so like I think Frostmage is the best, Devour's next, BM's next, Affliction, you know, and so on. I do think Arms might be a tiny bit better, but Fury is not unviable. This spec is absolutely slapping at the moment. A lot of Mountain Thane Fury Warriors is what I'm noticing. It does a lot of overall damage. Can be really good in Battlegrounds as well, for that same reason. Demon Hunter Havoc is also getting nerfed, much like Devourer, the Glimpse, and the nerfs to its Interrupt. But again, its main weakness is still there with Subtlety Rogue and Marksmanship Hunter, much like Devourer. Its burst damage is obviously not as remarkable as Devourer Demon Hunter, but having Mortal Strike, I think, is its edge. It's its advantage. Advantage? That's a word. We just made up that word. I think it's probably somewhere still in here with Arms Warrior. Maybe even better than Arms Warrior. I'll put it up here under the A+. For now, I think its weaknesses to Sub-Rogue and Marksman can be challenging, but it counters a lot of these casters and just absolutely eats them, and it's still really good. Holy Priest is getting some buffs, but I don't think it's going to move the needle too much in solo shuffle. The damage component is nice on Holy Fire, but the overall healing buff is not going to help their inherent issue with the fact that their mana regeneration, I think, is still the worst, and it doesn't really have too many active tools to help alleviate that. And then also, all of its throughput is based around healing output, which is reduced by dampening, unlike other healers, which have some mechanisms that allow them damage reduction. So it's just hard countered by games going to dampening. Doesn't have the mana to really even get there anyways. The Holy Fire is nice. It will feel better in Battlegrounds for sure, but I still think it's probably the weakest healer of everything at the moment. I think the best is probably, I could put it onto B tier here with Arcane Mage. Holy Paladin, still a really solid pick. I think I could confidently put this on A, maybe even A+, especially if you're playing Herald of the Sun. Just, it's in a good spot, just solid position. Not going to have too many problems with it, I think, at the moment when it comes to solo PvP. Marksmanship Hunter, I really want to put it up on S tier. I think it still does an insane amount of damage for how simple it is. I think maybe the worst I could do is A+, but I really think it's somewhere between A+ and B or S at the moment. It's countered by disarms, can struggle with DKs maybe, and maybe that's why I would leave it down here, just because Unholy DK might see an uptick. Mistweaver Monk, I kind of expect to not be too insane, especially with the not being able to counter the pet classes as much as it was previously. I don't know if it's as bad as Holy Priest. I think it can probably still go a little bit further than Holy Priest, but I'd probably say it was like the second to worst healer now, or pretty close to even with Paladin, depending on the actual result of these changes. Outlaw Rogue is still an A tier specialization. I still think it's actually really good, but again, much like Affliction, you have to master the specialization to really get the significant benefits that it provides. And I think that the UI, the baseline UI out of the box, is not really the best to display like what buffs you've got from Roll the Bones. The animation is not that great. It just disappears right away. It's hard to read in a moment when everything's cluttered on the screen. I wish they'd add a couple more visual cues, much like when you get a pistol shot proc and you get the pistol shot icons next to your character. I'd love that for Roll the Bones when you roll a jackpot or whatever the max buff is called now, and show some type of animation to show that you've got that, make it a little bit easier to read out of the box without having to set up all the weak or pop-ups that they've got built into the UI and take all those extra steps. I think it would go a long way to making it more accessible for new players, but it's got a lot more complexity to it, but it's still a very good specialization. Preservation Evoker, I'm going to put in A+, but I think, I don't know, it depends what you're doing. If you're doing Battlegrounds, it's still S tier, at least until next season when we see where the results of the changes to their flag carrying capacity is going to take them. But I think Disc and Prez are still, I don't know. I feel like Druid can actually compete pretty good with Prez. Maybe I'm going to put Prez here for solo PvP. But again, it depends. Battlegrounds, it's S. I'm mostly kind of leaning into Shuffle with this tier list, but for Battlegrounds, it's by far the best. But for overall Shuffle, I think it's maybe second. Close to second. Prot Warrior, much like Brewmaster, I think it does okay damage, but it's not too insane. Prot Paladin is the best tank still, even though they've nerfed it like 7 times or something like that. It's still the best tank. It's the highest rated, the easiest one to get rating on at the moment. Restoration Druid, I think, is honestly like equal with Prez. I'm putting it a little bit ahead right now in Shuffle, honestly, and the main reason for that is because people don't know how to do anything other than tunnel one target in Shuffle, which makes Resto Druid really strong when you do that, if you don't know how to switch targets. So Resto Druid and Prez, though, are very equal with each other. Retribution Paladin, although it's lost its big one-shot, still has a crazy level of support and off-healing, can get games going quite a long time, which is making it viable at the moment. I'm putting this one a little bit ahead of Arms Warrior. Maybe I should even put it ahead of Demon Hunter. It's a really good spec to go for right now in any content. It's good in threes, it's good in blitz, it's good in dueling, it's good in shuffle. It's just very well-rounded specialization that dominates every bracket. Restoration Shaman, I do think is probably jumping up here. I'm putting it above Paladin, above Mistweaver, and above Holy Priest, but not by a huge amount. I think it's probably on the heels though of Druid and Prez with the changes. I've seen more of these honestly even before the Riptide buff is coming in. I think Resto Shaman could move a bit more. This is a prediction tier list also, so when the patch actually goes live and I've played through it and we can see this for certain. Also, we don't know if things might be bugged or whatever is going to happen as far as hectic or craziness. So we'll kind of have to wait and see, but I do expect it to be rising above a significant portion of the other healers now that it's finally getting a little bit of attention. Shadow Priest, really good overall damage, still kind of relies on making it into dampening a lot of the time, so it feels like you're kind of a passenger princess hoping that your teammate is able to carry the game. It's kind of similar with Elemental Shaman sometimes as well. I definitely think it's worthy of A+ tier, mostly due to its durability. But although in some cases it's probably like, I would say like the worst of the A+ tier or very high A tier, like somewhere in between A or A+. It just doesn't really have like a lot of lockdown anymore, a lot of like significantly useful team utility either, relative to a lot of other casters. I am wondering if you complain enough, if you maybe could get your Psychic Core back as a PP talent, like Hunters are getting Scattershot or not. Because that would definitely go a long way as far as increasing your viability in a lot more forms of PP content. But right now, I think it's still really good. I think it's still a really good spec. Subtlety Rogue, I think, is still very strong. I'm going to put it somewhere in here with Outlaw Rogue. Again, Subtlety Rogue is a bit easier to pull off than Outlaw, which is why I would put it slightly higher than Outlaw as far as its complexity. But it's a really good spec. It does really well into these guys, which there's a lot of. Really well into these guys, which there's a lot of, and really well into these guys, which there's not a lot of, which I don't understand how there isn't. But it's a really good pick. The melee balance is honestly the best of any category, I feel like, for specializations, because similarly with Survival Hunter, I think Survival Hunter is very good spec at the moment as well. I'd say maybe somewhere in here with Enhancement Shaman. Does really good burst damage right now with the Sentinel build. Crazy damage on the takedown cooldown window cycle for it at the moment, which is the main reason it's up this high along with Boomstick. But it's a really good pick. Unholy DK, I do think is going to get better. I was putting it down here with Frost, but I think it's at least going to be here at the bottom of the A+ tier, maybe higher, depending on how much this Mistweaver change is actually going to impact it. It still struggles with Paladin, with their poison cleansing mechanic or disease dispelling mechanics. It still does struggle with that annoyance. I kind of hope that at some point they address that. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see, maybe when they do their PvP talent revamp that they've said that they're going to look at, which they can't look at right now because the population isn't big enough or something, but maybe at some point they'll be able to look at it. Unholy DK, though, I think is definitely skirting in towards the bottom of the A+ and definitely climbing as a result of the changes. Vengeance Demon Hunter honestly wasn't too bad. It's like an okay flag carrier, has a lot of crowd control. Damage is a little bit low, but the crowd control definitely makes up for it. I'd say like maybe somewhere in here. Again, the tanks are very close to each other, so if you are picking a tank for like Battleground Blitz or something like that, not a huge amount of difference aside from maybe Guardian, and then Prop Paladin in arenas. Windwalker, this might be a hot take, but I'm actually putting Windwalker down here on A, and the main reason for this is its defense. This is very similar. Like, these three guys are down here because they're very squishy. These guys are often targeted and die very easily. These guys, it's either a little bit of lack of finishing power and defense as well on these categories here for these guys. And then everything else that's like up here is either like complete god mode or very powerful and viable. And then a few of these guys are still lagging behind the rest of the pack here for the finale here of season 1. Who knows if we're going to see more changes or not. The fact that they made changes here for this season does intrigue me to want to guess when the patch is coming out. Like, is it coming out before BlizzCon in the tournament, or is it coming out after the tournament, right? Because you wouldn't think that, like, what's the point of moving the class changes right now? Everybody's already either just kind of finishing out their rewards and preparing for the next season, or do they actually want this to be the gameplay for BlizzCon? I do think that is noteworthy, at least. We will have to wait and see and find out, but this is just my thoughts right now, given the changes that are being implemented for Tuesday. I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Thank you guys very much for watching as always, and I will see you in the next one.